Brittany Furlan had become accustomed to working tirelessly, with a strong belief that every effort would eventually be rewarded. She was a strategic marketer at Pereira and Associates, one of the city's top advertising firms, specializing in creative campaigns for major brands. Every day, Brittany immersed herself in creative meetings, trend research, and designing innovative marketing strategies. Every aspect of her work, from the large billboards to the small media campaigns, was the result of her hard work and intelligence. The working environment she was a part of was not only challenging due to the scale of the industry, but also full of internal conflict. Her colleagues were no strangers to talent, yet Brittany was one of the few who truly believed that creativity and dedication would eventually prevail. She had a special workspace wooden desk, concise marketing and creativity books, and a few old family photos from her university days. Whenever she sat at her desk, she felt a deep connection to her work, to the projects she had built from the ground up, though she had spent the past 5 years at the company. Brittany never felt truly isolated. Every morning, she would chat with her colleagues about old projects and new strategies. Her team, including Ava, her longtime friend, always supported each other through difficult times. Together, they created successful campaigns, proving that they were not just colleagues, but passionate creators, sharing the same enthusiasm for their craft. However, despite this camaraderie, Brittany couldn't shake off the feeling of being overlooked in a company filled with so many talented individuals. Each time Ava was praised, her words of admiration made Brittany's heart sink, even though she never voiced it. Ava was a shining star in the company, always standing out in meetings and being mentioned for important projects. She had everything Brittany didn't: confidence, attention, while Brittany quietly worked and contributed. But in that silence, she hid a growing sense of insecurity. This feeling of isolation was only intensified when the company started working with a major new client, VeloTech, an up-and-coming tech company known for its ambition and creativity. This was Brittany's chance. She felt deep in her bones. This campaign could finally be the stepping stone that would launch her into the spotlight. All her hard work, the late nights, sweat, and tears would finally pay off and bring her to the goal she had always dreamed of. This was the campaign she had meticulously planned, outlining strategies she believed would elevate VeloTech to new heights. But everything changed on one fateful morning. Brittany walked into the office with a calm demeanor, carrying the campaign report for an important meeting with Daniel Vargas, the company's creative director. She had spent days perfecting every detail, refining each sentence of the strategy to create a flawless presentation. She believed that today would be the day she could finally showcase everything she had worked for. However, when she entered the meeting room, something unexpected happened. Both Daniel and Ava were there, but Daniel's demeanor was different. He didn't look at her the way he normally did. Instead, he simply tapped his head, gesturing for her to sit down. Ava, seated beside him, relaxed naturally, her sharp, self-satisfied gaze fixed on Brittany. "Brittany," Daniel began, his voice deep and devoid of emotion, "we've decided to go in a different direction for the VeloTech campaign." Brittany felt a chill run down her spine. "But I've spent so much time on this strategy. Why the sudden change?" she asked, trying to stay calm despite the shock filling her heart. Daniel sighed, avoiding her gaze. "Ava will take over the campaign from here. She has a different perspective and will lead the team more effectively." The words seemed to breeze past Brittany's ears, but they crashed into her mind like a painful blow. She had thought of herself as the lead on this campaign, the one who had guided the company to a new direction. Yet, now she was being cast aside. Her ideas, her efforts left unacknowledged. The innovative concepts she had worked tirelessly to develop were now being discarded without any clear explanation. Ava sat in silence, her lips curling into a gentle smile as her gaze drifted past Brittany, as though she was just a shadow in the room. This only deepened Brittany's sense of betrayal. She had given everything, and now, her once trusted friend had replaced her. It wasn't just about work anymore, it was about trust, too. That was the first shock, and it shattered her belief in the company and the relationships she had built in an instant. Brittany sat there, feeling as though the air in the room was slowly draining away. She couldn't grasp what had just happened. All she felt was an overwhelming emptiness. Everything she had worked for over the years, everything she thought she had achieved, was now slipping away due to an unexpected decision. The feeling of being betrayed, discarded, and ultimately left behind was crushing like a shadow no one acknowledged. She left the meeting room, walking like someone in a daze, her eyes clouded with swirling thoughts. Her footsteps echoed down the empty hallway, like the sound of someone who had lost everything. Brittany sat down in a quiet chair, staring at the computer screen, but unable to think of anything more. She didn't know what to do next. All she could think was how everything she had believed in was now out of her reach. She couldn't keep going like this, and deep down, she knew one thing: she had to rise again, to find herself. But could she, in the days following Daniel and Ava's decision? Brittany felt as though she was living in a different world. The company she had devoted her youth to now felt like a shadow. The meetings no longer inspired her. The projects no longer excited her. Each day, she walked into the office with a heavy heart, like a wandering ghost through the rooms, through spaces that once felt like hers. She was no longer the one driving change. She had become just another part of the machine that kept the company running. But in the long, lonely nights, when her soul was stirred by the silence, Brittany began to realize something she had never considered before. Maybe she didn't need to rely on others to succeed. The feeling of being pushed aside forced her to confront herself, to look at what she truly wanted, not what the company or society expected. And in that moment, she realized something important: she still had the ability, still had the strength to rise again, to create the change she had always longed for. One evening, when the city had fallen into slumber and she was sitting in front of her computer, Brittany received an unexpected email. It was a job offer from a competitor of Pereira and Associates. While this company did not have the same prestigious reputation as the one she had worked for, it had risen as a bright star in the field of creative marketing. The email wasn't just a job offer. It was a subtle reminder that opportunities still existed, even when old doors had closed. When Brittany finished reading the email, she didn't feel the same excitement she had once felt. Instead, there was an unclear emptiness. The invitation felt like a painful reminder of the cost of failure, but it was also a spark, a small flame in her heart. She had once thought that her career could only thrive at Pereira and Associates, where she had built relationships and left her mark. But now, she understood that success never resided in just one place, on just one path. It could be found in unexpected places, even if she walked alone. The next day, Brittany did not go straight to the office. Instead, she chose a quiet cafe to think. She sat by the window, gazing outside, where the first rays of the day pierced through the clouds, waking up the city. She thought about the years that had passed, about the projects she had completed, about the successes that she could have achieved. She felt as if an opportunity had been stolen from her, but now failure had become the stepping stone to finding a new path. Brittany couldn't stay in pain forever. She started planning every day. She spent time learning about the market, researching new trends in marketing. She followed competitor companies, studied the creative strategies they were developing. She didn't just stick to theoretical research. She began applying what she learned to her personal projects. A few weeks later, she started building a new marketing strategy for a creative product she had long dreamed of. This wasn't a strategy for a company, it was for herself, for the future she wanted to create. But the challenges didn't stop at work. At the same time, Brittany began facing a much bigger crisis family conflict. Her mother, Astria, had always expected her to follow the family career path and join a network of relationships her mother had built over the years. However, Brittany chose to walk her own path, and in doing so, she gradually grew apart from them. Her mother couldn't understand why she would abandon a stable job, a promising future, to chase dreams with no guarantees. Every family meeting became a heated argument, with Brittany constantly being questioned for her choices. One evening, when Brittany was sitting alone in her small apartment, her mother called. This time, it wasn't the usual reminders about work or the future. It was a single question that made her heart freeze. Why can't you be like Callista? Your sister Callista, her older sister, had always been the perfect daughter in her mother's eyes. She had always achieved everything her mother expected and was the daughter her mother was proud of. But Brittany, with her different choices and decisions, had become an outsider in her own family. She hung up the phone without saying a word, feeling lost and unable to process the torrent of emotions in her mind. She understood that, whether she succeeded or not, her mother would always look at her with disappointment. But Brittany could no longer live in the shadow of those expectations. She had to find herself, not for her mother, not for anyone else, but for her own sake, in the days that followed. Brittany not only focused on her work, but also began seeking out new opportunities. She participated in marketing campaigns, sent her strategic plans to other companies. She understood that only by stepping out of her comfort zone would she be able to find resolution and growth. And so, little by little, she started regaining her confidence, slowly rebuilding what had been lost. But along the way, challenges remained. New opportunities brought new difficulties, and Brittany knew that she had to be stronger, more determined than ever before. Time passed, and Brittany was no longer the girl who hid in the shadows of the company. She had begun to step outside, looking at new opportunities and refining her approach with a determined gaze. But deep down, she knew that to truly reclaim what she had lost, she didn't just need to work hard. She had to confront directly those who had betrayed her. They were Daniel and Ava, the ones who had cast her aside without explanation or acknowledgement. And when Brittany found her opportunity to rise, they would see that she was not someone easily discarded. That fall, Brittany participated in an international marketing competition where experts from around the world gathered to share new strategies. She knew that this was not just an opportunity to showcase herself. It was her chance to send a powerful message to those who had once looked down on her. She didn't just want to win. She wanted to show them that they had made a mistake by underestimating her talent. On the final day of the competition, when she presented her strategy and received high praise from the judges, an unexpected phone call came. On the other end of the line was Ava. She spoke with a tone Brittany couldn't recognize, a mix of chaos in every word. "Brittany, I know we had differences before," Ava began, but Brittany didn't let her finish. "What do you want now?" Brittany interrupted, not hiding the coldness in her voice. There was a long pause before Ava spoke again. "We need you. The big project, VeloTech, is struggling. I know I didn't listen to you before, but now we need your help." Brittany remained silent, feeling both surprise and an overwhelming storm of anger rise within her. She had given everything to this project, poured her heart and soul into it, but people like Ava had never appreciated it. Now, when everything was falling apart, they were coming back to beg for her help. "What do you expect me to do, help you after you pushed me out?" Brittany replied, her tone dripping with disdain. "No, that's not it," Ava said quickly. "The company has arranged the product launch. If we don't change things, we'll all lose our jobs, and I don't want that." Brittany could feel herself being dragged back into a game she had left behind. Ava didn't realize that all the temptations, all the lies, no longer had the power to change her mind. She no longer needed constant validation or approval. Brittany had found her true value, and it wasn't something she would easily give away anymore. She hung up the phone without replying, but instead of feeling angry, Brittany felt a strange clarity. What she needed wasn't help or begging from those who had betrayed her. What she needed was to show them that she didn't need their approval to succeed, and to do that, she had to continue acting in silence, not allowing any changes to sway her direction. Brittany began adjusting her marketing strategies to suit the market, not relying on big companies or the names that had betrayed her. She created a personal brand that spoke for itself, not through words, but through tangible results, clear strategies, and creativity each day. She reached out to new companies, potential partners, and gradually built a separate network, one that no longer had anyone standing behind her like before. While Brittany kept moving forward, events began to affect Daniel and Ava. The VeloTech project that Brittany had built was now facing major setbacks. The company was not only struggling financially, but the strategy Ava had implemented was not yielding the expected results. Everything was falling apart. And what made Brittany feel both satisfied and vindicated was that the project she had poured everything into was now confronting the very failures created by those who had cast her aside. She knew that her success wasn't about revenge in the way people typically think. It was proof to herself that she could do it. But this transformation wasn't just about her work. It was about how Brittany viewed herself. She was no longer the insecure girl waiting for recognition. Time had passed, and now she was the one creating results. As the months went by, Brittany's strategies began to show clear results. More and more partners came to her, and the small projects she undertook began to leave a distinct mark. And when she received an invitation to join a large project from an international company, Brittany knew she was getting closer to achieving the greatest goal of her life. At the same time, news of the decline of Pereira and Associates began to spread across the media. Rumors about the failure of VeloTech and Daniel and Ava facing the fallout started to circulate. Everyone in the marketing field began to realize that what Brittany had faced wasn't just a personal challenge. It was a lesson for all. Innovation, creativity, and the ability to overcome adversity had proven to her that no one could remain stuck in the past. The people who had betrayed her were now left with nothing but disappointment and bitterness in their own work. A month after the phone call from Ava, Brittany felt a transformation within herself. It wasn't just about work. It was about how she now viewed the relationships that had once defined her life. She was no longer the girl sitting in the shadows, fingers waiting for recognition or an apology from those who had betrayed her. Everything had changed, and she had realized that to truly grow, she couldn't continue living in the past, unable to endure the wounds of the past. She had to do something not for revenge, but to prove to herself that she could stand strong. Brittany decided to re-enter the world she had once been part of. But this time, she would not step into it with the hopeful, watery-eyed gaze she had before. She no longer believed in promises or the assurances of change. Instead, She would rebuild her own path from the ground up, step by step, not rushing, but defining her direction. She started seeking out smaller opportunities. Things might not happen immediately, and Brittany understood that rebuilding from the basics was necessary. She reached out to those in the industry she had once worked with, but instead of seeking help, she offered cooperation. She didn't expect acknowledgement from anyone. She simply wanted to create value that she could be proud of. At the same time, a big opportunity came her way. One of the clients she had worked with before, a startup tech company, was looking for a marketing expert to develop a new campaign. They not only wanted a creative strategy, but also someone with a long-term vision, someone who could redefine their brand's identity in their eyes. Brittany knew this was the opportunity she needed. She didn't need to prove herself to anyone else. She just needed to prove to herself that she could still make it. When she accepted the offer, no one at her old company knew. It wasn't a secret arrangement, but rather a choice she made to no longer allow herself to suffer through unnecessary things. She didn't need to speak up, didn't need to look back at the people who had brought her to this point. Brittany knew that, in her career, silence could be the most powerful weapon. But, like a sign from the universe, a week after she started the campaign for her new company, the collapse of Pereira and Associates became fully apparent. The projects Ava had worked on for VeloTech didn't deliver the expected results, and Daniel, who had always been Ava's shield, couldn't cover up the serious mistakes in their strategy. News of the company's failure began spreading beyond the industry, and soon, the calls started coming in for Brittany. They weren't calling to apologize, nor to ask for forgiveness, but the offers of collaboration from other companies, from clients who had witnessed her dedication, started to appear more frequently. Brittany didn't hesitate. She had learned how to fight, and this time, she wouldn't let opportunities slip by simply because of intense emotional allure. With every offer, every new project, she carefully considered it, not just for the money, but to build a solid influence, to create strategies that truly added value and could change how people saw a brand and the people behind it. One afternoon, while Brittany was perfecting a strategy for a potential client, she received an unexpected email from Daniel. In the email, he didn't apologize or admit any mistakes, but the last line made Brittany pause. "If it weren't for your help, I and this company wouldn't have lasted as long as we did." Brittany chuckled softly, but didn't respond. She understood that those words no longer meant anything to her. For a long time, she had stopped needing validation or acknowledgement from those who had once disregarded her. Instead, she would achieve even greater success. What she had done, what she would do, were the answers Brittany had been seeking all along. A week later, she received an invitation from one of the largest companies in the industry, an opportunity she had always dreamed of. This was the push she needed. Brittany didn't need to argue, didn't need to go back to those who had left her behind. She knew that now. She was in a different position, a position that no one could easily defeat. Looking back, Brittany realized that her return wasn't about loud revenge or a fierce battle. It was simply a powerful affirmation of her true value, a way for her to live authentically. And though her old company and the people who had betrayed her no longer mattered, Brittany had found a new path, a path she could walk on her own, without needing to accept anyone else's terms. Brittany stood on the balcony, looking out over the city, where the bright dawn began to break through the towering buildings. Everything around her was changing. She was no longer an outsider, no longer the abandoned figure hiding in a dark corner of her old company. She had found her own path. And now, the results she had worked so hard to build spoke for themselves. No more explanations, no more apologies. She knew that everything could be achieved through actions and results. The major project Brittany had taken on for the tech startup began to yield unexpected results. The marketing strategy she had developed not only increased revenue, but also helped the company elevate its brand position within the tech industry. The creative plans she had crafted, strategies that had once only existed in her thoughts, were now succeeding and creating meaningful change. She no longer needed to prove her value to anyone, because the results spoke for themselves. The numbers, the successful campaigns, and the changes in how people viewed the brand were the clearest proof, despite being busy with work. Brittany couldn't help but think about Pereira and Associates. The company she had once devoted herself to was now facing the stagnation she had known would come. Everything began to unravel when the company's major clients pulled out. The strategies that Ava and Daniel had applied to VeloTech had failed catastrophically. The company couldn't retain its key partners, and soon enough, the calls from clients started to fade. The company's leaders couldn't withstand the pressure. Daniel, who had made Brittany feel inadequate, was now facing the very decisions he had been unable to make before. His wrong moves were leading to the downfall of an entire marketing empire. Ava, who had taken the VeloTech project from Brittany, was also not spared from the decline. Surely, she couldn't have imagined that the strategies she had implemented would fail so spectacularly. Everything seemed to be falling apart before their eyes. Old partners began to shift their focus, and Ava, once so confident in her abilities, now had to face failure not only in her work but also within herself. The arrogance and bravado she had displayed all along had cost her everything she once had. When Brittany heard about Ava and Daniel's downfall from an industry acquaintance, a strange sense of calm washed over her. It wasn't smug satisfaction or anger, but an unexplainable peace. She didn't need to do anything for revenge. Their mistakes had led to their own downfall, and now they were paying the price for things they couldn't erase. Brittany no longer sought validation from anyone. She didn't need to prove who she was, because the results had already spoken for themselves. One afternoon, as she sat in her office at the startup, reviewing the growth in revenue, Brittany received a call from Daniel. This time, his voice sounded weaker than ever, as if he were trying to find a way out. "Brittany," he began, I realize now what I've done. I didn't think things would turn out like this. I know I overlooked you and what you were doing, but the company is on the verge of collapse. I don't have many options left." Brittany sat there in silence. She didn't answer. She had heard enough apologies and regrets from the people who had once betrayed her. She knew that the price Daniel had to pay wasn't the result she was looking for. She didn't want to change him, didn't want to see him suffer. The only thing she wanted was for him to understand that her success didn't need to rely on the mistakes of others. "Thank you for calling," Brittany finally said, her voice calm, not a hint of resentment. "But I don't need to confront you to feel my victory. You've done it all yourself." The call ended, and Brittany felt an odd sense of tranquility. She didn't need to respond to betrayal with hatred. What she had done, what she had achieved, was the best response. She had not only won in her career, but she had also made peace with herself. She no longer lived for the approval of others. She lived for herself, for what she had overcome and built. In the end, Brittany understood that victory wasn't about defeating someone else. It was about overcoming herself, rediscovering her true value. She hadn't failed in defining who she was. She had risen, not for revenge, but because she knew she deserved success, love, and recognition. And in that peace, She knew that nothing could ever make her fall again.